Welcome to Beyond Perception, where it's, as always, about breaking out of a limited understanding, a limited perspective on life, and waking up to our human nature. And possibly today, also to our German nature, to our true self, and really to our connectedness with all life. I am Simon, and I'm so happy to be here today with William Toel. Born in the US in 1945, he's a speaker and author with a positive vision for Germany. And for more than 30 years, he has been really an observer, predictor of developments in Germany and became an expert. And for the last 3 decades, William and his wife, Lisa, have spent much of their time helping German people understand why it's good to be German. And they also published a booklet called Es ist gut, Deutsche zu sein, which already has been read by more than 150,000 people. And from what I know, your goal is to set the German people free. So, dear William Toel, it's really awesome to have you here today. Welcome.
Yes, thank you.
And I just shared a little bit with you before there. It feels to me as kind of different pieces of the puzzle are coming together. And I'm really, really grateful for you being here, because when I watched the first interview with you, I believe it was 3-4 months ago, my original reaction was, okay, this is a little bit weird. Yeah, why does he say always "I love you"? Yeah, for who you are. And then I was asking myself, why would he love us Germans? Yeah, and there's nothing to love about us. Yeah, and that made me even a little bit suspicious. Yeah. Like, what does he want? Love is not free. There must be a bargain to that. Yeah, there must be a motive behind being nice. And then I started thinking, and I started to put it, what you shared, into my own individual experience over the last years, and kind of what seems to be happening on a German collective level right now with my own experience. And I want to, and then I hand it over to you. I just want to share this little piece of individual experience because I feel it's relevant to the Germans out there, yeah, to put your message maybe like in a context, yeah, or maybe for those who are like, okay, this is a little bit weird or so, yeah, and my own experience, I know how difficult it can be to perceive love, yeah. Especially when you have experienced trauma, because it's kind of as a reaction to seemingly painful emotional sensation or trauma. Yeah? It's kind of like a reaction is to pull inside, yeah, your being, yeah, and maybe kind of like resulting in a sense of numbing down your senses, yeah, and kind of like moving into the intellect, yeah, using your intellect, kind of a mechanistic, logical analysis of the situations instead of really being able to listen to the heart or the spirit or the soul, or whatever term you want to use here, and to look at the certain situation and judge it. And so being in this little box here, yeah, where I come from, and I feel this is relevant to Germans, you kind of need to cross-reference what's happening to kind of like compare it with outside authorities or experts or studies or so. Because the sense of who you are, yeah, your own knowing, yeah, your own self-reliance, kind of also disappeared with this withdrawing inside, yeah. And when then someone, for example, like you, comes to just say, like, I love you, yeah, and kind of gives you what you deep inside unconsciously long for, you can't understand it, yeah, because you can't feel it, the quality of it, yeah? Or if it's honest or the truth in this love, because for so long you experienced this lack of it, and also like unconsciously believed you're not worthy of it, yeah? And then like if someone comes with love, the questioning starts, like this little mind machine, like, why would someone love me? Like, I'm not lovable. Does he want something from me? Yeah. And what does he want from me? And then kind of a cognitive dissonance starts, yeah, and something is projected back on the one coming with love, yeah, to rationalize that you don't deserve it, because you're unconsciously believing you're not lovable. And then the psyche starts creating this doubt, the fear, inventing stories, yeah, that the other person might even want to manipulate you, control you, and that's all on unconscious level. And that's really tricky. And like I experienced it myself, and luckily I kind of like escaped that dynamic. And that came to mind when I listened to your information and your interviews. And so I'm really excited to explore this further with you. And now it's all yours. So yeah, like when my first question would be, when a part of your message is the German collective trauma, right? And in your book, you say, in your book, Es ist gut, ein Deutscher zu sein, you write about the German trauma and that everybody raised in Germany has it, yeah, even if we don't know we have it, yeah. And yeah, maybe you can share a little bit. I know you already extensively talked about it, but maybe connect it also with this dynamic, why for some German it's so difficult to get it, yeah, that there's someone to appreciate them.
You used the term connecting the pieces of the puzzle, fitting the puzzle together. So it actually creates a picture. And the picture is complete and you can see. And I think that's a good metaphor. But, you know, it's actually happening now. It started a few months ago. You know, I have talked about the perfect storm as a metaphor for change for some time. And on the night of the 21st, the perfect storm is in Germany. And so that means there's change that's already taking place. The puzzle is starting to fit together. Now, 96% of the Germans are still asleep. They're very happy to be asleep, and they would prefer to remain asleep. But there is an awake portion, and they are not extremists. They are not crazy people. They're not people with wild ideas. A few days ago, I finished my 158th meeting with these people. And of course, I'm crisscrossing Germany, you know, a 4-hour drive to here, and then a 3-hour drive to here, and a 3-hour drive to here, and doing maybe as many as 4 meetings a day. Those are group meetings, plus individual meetings where people say, I want to talk to you for 10 minutes, or you need to come here. And so those happen 2 or 3 times a day as well. So change is already taking place. The puzzle is already starting to become more complete. And maybe historically, if you look at it just from a human standpoint, cycles only last 70 years or 75 years, whether that's a life cycle or whether it's a psychological cycle. It's time for something to change in Germany, because you've now had the full 75 years of living under one, let's call it a spirit. And that spirit, of course, was what was left over in May of 1945, when all other beliefs and everything else were gone. I mean, you went from a complete belief system to having a vacuum of belief systems. And then, of course, naturally, the Allies would want to make sure that there wasn't a repeat. World War I was only over for a few years, and World War II was already moving towards its beginnings. And so people learned their lesson. They watched Germany rebuild after World War I, bigger, better, and stronger in just an amazingly short period of time. And that made a real impression on the world, because that means that could easily have happened again. Germans do have an ability to create. They have systems, they have mentality, they have certain gifts and talents that allow them to create pretty complete items in fairly short periods of time. So the psychological operation, that is the spirit that I've spoken of, that has been over Germany or in Germany for the last 75 years, is a very unique one and a very powerful one too. And you've heard me say that it took generations of people who loved being German, and it created an all new type of human being. The psychological operations from Bletchley Park, the unconditional nature of the surrender and subservience to the Allies, everything came together to create a spirit that really made Germans into anti-Germans, or what I call Gegendeutsch. Germans who wouldn't dare like anything German, including themselves. And that's, of course, the sad part. So the idea of self-love in Germany for the past 75 years, the idea of loving others because they are German, these are unheard of concepts. I mean, to even say the word, I have looked at historical fact and I am proud to be German. You can lose your job. The police will immediately begin paying attention to you. But even more importantly, your neighbors will stop speaking to you because there's something wrong with you. And when I first started saying those words, it was the greatest sin in Germany when I first started was to like Germans. If you liked Germans, you were immediately, Simone, under suspicion. There was a cynical nature that started at that point in time, and there was something wrong with you. But as I've gone along, 158 meetings really in the last 90 days or less than 90 days, I'm beginning to wonder if it isn't a crime, not simply a sin, but a crime to love Germans. It's almost like it's the litmus test for insanity. If you want to be judged as whether you're insane or whether you're normal, the idea of loving Germans probably is all the proof they would need that you are not all there, that you are insane. Because obviously no one could love Germans, no one should love Germans. And so that is a hurdle that I have to face every single day. I face it by going into the living rooms. That's how I face it. If I were a TV personality or an internet personality, then my words would be received with disdain. I would be judged or prejudged. But I disarm people because I show up in their living room when they ask me to. I never ask them if I can come, but they write to Lisa, who you've corresponded with, and they say, will you send your husband? And the answer is almost always yes. And so someone drives me, I usually sleep in the car, and I show up and I'm in a living room and there's 40 people there, or 45 people, or sometimes more. And we're sitting so close that we're within touching distance. And I tell them, I'm here so that you can test me. I want you to test me. You get all of your senses involved. Ask the most difficult questions you can imagine, personal questions, whatever you want. But I'm not going to leave your living room until you are comfortable. You're either comfortable that William is a fake, which is fine, or you're comfortable that William is real. And that's something that each one of you has to decide on your own. So I stay for 2 hours or however long people want, so that they all have questions on their mind. After that first little video in Cologne, my wife and I were hoping that 500 Germans would see that. I mean, I'm serious. We were thinking if 500 saw it, that'd be a miracle. And now that one is over 200,000 people have seen that video. And a very credible man stopped me the other day and he said, William, do you know that video is popular in Russia? I said, no, sir, I'd never heard that. And he said, yes, there you're called the little Trump, whatever that means. And then another man approached me and said he was in Vancouver a couple of weeks ago, and he saw the video on a channel there, and it was doing extremely well. So I don't know what happened, but I do know that Germans need to be loved, and they need to be listened to. and being listened to is a form of love that has not been extended to Germans. The Länder Parlamenten don't listen. The councils in communities don't listen. The Bundestag certainly doesn't listen, or if they do, there's no one to listen to them. So what I'm doing in a microcosm is, if somebody says, Mrs. Toel, send your husband to me in Saarland, I go there, and I will stay as long as it takes for them to be comfortable, where at the end, people, there is a sense of, I can't really describe it, Simon, you almost have to be there, but all of the tension is gone from the room, and there is this wonderful sense of loving. There's a sense of kindness. There's a sense where maybe people from 3 different areas came together in that living room, but now they're hugging each other. And I know, of course, that breaks all the rules of COVID and this and that, but it's real. And in most meetings, most people will come up and touch me. And they'll come up and they want to hold on to my hand, or they'll grab a hold of my coat, or they just want the closeness. And I think it's because they can feel the love. They're not hearing the words love. Of course, it's shocking to walk into a living room and say, I love you. But that is not what's causing them to react. There's something in the room that is the opposite of the spirit that Germans have been forced to live under for all of these years. And it's shockingly opposite of that spirit, but it resonates to them. And sometime after the first hour or the hour and 10 minutes, all of a sudden there's a relaxing that's taking place in them. And I don't think it's something that they want or that they desire or they even know what to do with. But the relaxing says, it's okay for me to be myself. Now, it just so happens that being yourself, in this case, means being German, which of course has been banned by the Gegendeutsch, which was put into Germany as a spirit. And so there is a moment of confusion that takes place, and that is, why do I all of a sudden feel good about something that for all these years I have felt bad about, or ashamed of, or guilty of? And so, and then by the end of the meeting, that confusion pretty much goes away. And then it's just a simple, childlike, loving nature in the room. And that expresses itself in touching and in hugging and in saying things. I mean, I have many people after a meeting, not all, but many, who will come up to me and say to me silently, William, I love you. Well, where is that coming from? I mean, when's the last time you heard a German say anything like that to anybody? But it's something that they want to say. But the testing has finished. And then there's a resonating that somewhere in their spirit, or maybe in the deutsche Seele, somewhere there's something that says, this guy's okay. What you see is what you get. So that's the phenomenon that takes place 4 times a day, or sometimes 6 times a day with me. And people say, don't you get tired? You're in your 70, 60-year-old life. I don't get tired when I'm with Germans. I get tired when I'm away from Germans. then I get very tired. But when I'm with Germans, I feel a sense of sort of a Zeitlost. I feel that I'm not really connected to time when I'm with them. So I think I could do 7 or 8 meetings a day if it wasn't the driving. The driving really gets tiresome because you look at Germany, you think it's a small country, but you try driving around, and you're going through villages, little narrow streets, and it takes 2 hours to get anywhere.
I can imagine.
So I'll stop and turn it back to you. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. So a couple of questions. When you speak of the anti-spirit, or basically when you meet Germans and you talk with them, and from what I understand, at some point when they feel listened to, there's kind of a relaxation, an energetical relaxation. And would you say that kind of there's a reconnection with the original, like you used the term deutsche Seele, and the anti-spirit is kind of dissolved, or how would you describe it? Or like, what is the anti-spirit? What is
Well,
the
the anti-spirit, or the Gegendeutsch spirit, of course, was, there in the summer of 45, and all the of course, the Fragenbogen and all the re-education programs, and that was even with children. Every German was told that, everything your parents have taught you is false, and everything that your government has said to you is not only false, but it's from the devil and false. So it's double false. And everything you to school is incorrect and false. And so you're actually, all of you are beginning over now as children. But we don't want you growing up to be the adults that we've had to fight with for the past 5 years. We want you growing up being allied type adults. We want you to be steeped in Western liberal capitalism and democracy. We want you to think like we think. And we want you to listen to American music. Simone, it's just been amazing in the last week. I'm in a little village in Hesse, and it's all timbered houses. And the narrow streets and the timbered houses and the smell of the land around the community, this could be from 1875 or 1885, and it would be exactly the same, with the exception is you're trying to have breakfast, and here's the Rolling Stones screaming their music out, "I don't get no satisfaction." And you can't even have breakfast in this little Hessian town, but that is normal. It's almost impossible to find German music at breakfast or at any other time in Germany. You would honestly believe that you were in Omaha, Nebraska, or Cleveland, Ohio, if you didn't see that the surroundings are drastically different. So this anti-spirit has only American and British and French heroes, Marilyn Monroe and Clark Gable and James Dean and Madonna. And these people are everywhere, even in Berlin. They're in restaurants, they're on the walls, they're in murals. And then American music is everywhere. Over 25% of the signage in the capital city of Germany is in the English language. And it's normal. It's like it's equally normal. It's like being in Brussels, where you're reading two languages on a sign side by side. But Germany is German, and yet the English language is an equal competitive force. I've seen, I don't know how many thousands of trucks go by on the Autobahn in the last 40 days, and 30% of the writing on the trucks in Europe is in English, or the subtitles or the quips are in English. And English isn't a language in the European continent other than a side language. So the Gegendeutsch is really a foreign spirit or influence that permeated Germany after the war. And if you wanted to get along, if you wanted to get food, if you wanted to go to an Amt somewhere and get something done, or get a certificate, or get a stamp, you had to pretend to be more of a foreigner than you did a German. And you certainly had to show that you were permeated with this allied spirit. And of course, Bletchley Park was a massive psychological operation to help Germans to act in a certain way, speak in a certain way. Now, much later, we said, oh, that's political correctness, that's permeating the world as part of the new world order, and etc. But Germans had this long before political correctness. Germans have been looking over their shoulder to see who's listening and to see if they're being misinterpreted or what are people thinking about them long before political correctness was even a word. This is part of the spirit of Gegendeutsch that allowed Germans to live. And it was an actual bargain, Simon, that was offered to them. The Morgenthau plan was very real. There were to be no more Germans. Germans knew in 1945 the Morgenthau plan. And yet they were offered a deal, and that is, we will allow you to survive, Germans, if you promise to never be Germans again. If you promise to never act like Germans again, you will be allowed to survive, and you will be allowed to live at above a subsistence level. So that's the spirit that has been there, and it doesn't allow love. It doesn't allow listening. It doesn't allow opinions, and it certainly doesn't allow asking questions. And that's been a major deficit in Germany for the past 75 years. Germans before World War II would ask questions and drive you crazy. Steckt dahinter, wie ist eigentlich gewesen ist, was ist wirklich wahr, and on and on. And Germans since World War II don't ask any questions. They don't dare ask questions. Or if they do ask questions, it's something they already know the answer to. So it's safe. So this Gegendeutsch spirit is a definite definite way of living, but it's not German. And so Germans have been forced to live as non-Germans or anti-Germans. And I think when I walk into the living room and say, I love you, what I'm saying is perfectly, I know you, and it's perfectly all right for you to be German. It's perfectly all right for you to be who you were created to be. And there's no reason, you have no reason to be ashamed of it. You have no reason to feel guilty about it. And then I think that something in there is resonating, but it's not resonating to the head, because you're right in your introduction. Germans in this new world where they cannot be Germans, they have pushed everything above the eyebrows. Any information that you give a German, they will push it above the eyebrows and up so that they can handle it, so they can analyze it, so they can make it theoretical. And then they put it into a system or into an SAP type box, and then they make sense out of it, and they make concrete bits out of it, and then they push it away from them, up and out, so that they can see it from an analytical view that is no longer part of them. And so this is a normal way for Germans to interact with information in this last 75 years. Nothing is allowed near the heart, and nothing is allowed for the heart to be able to say, to have its own verdict, let's say. So when I come into a living room, I'm saying it's perfectly whole. I'm speaking to your heart. I'm ignoring your head. And I'm speaking to your heart in a way that is truthful, and it's real, and it's very primal. I will say to Germans, my love for you is not only passionate, it actually is on the verge of being intimate. And so they have to take those words and they have to make sense out of them. And they go through a period of pushing them away, and then they go through a period of trying to figure out what I'm really saying. And then there's a period of confusion, and then there's a period of acceptance. And at the end, it's almost like William is a friend of ours. And he's a friend who's been gone, and he's been somewhere else. And now he's in my living room, and I kind of like him. And I think he really likes me, not as somebody I have to pretend to be, but as somebody that I really am. And then there's that relaxation that takes place that says, William, you're a friend, and you're like a good friend, or maybe you're like a lost relative. Maybe you're like an uncle who we thought was dead and gone, and all of a sudden you're here again. And now we remember that we really liked you. And so I think that's, to me, that's what's happening.
A couple of questions. So when you say the deutsche Seele, what does that mean to you? From like, what I understand, we have an individualized soul, but then the deutsche Seele, like how does that fit into that? Like what is that? And also in that context, when I looked into the German dictionary of the Brothers Grimm, I think I found something like plus 600 different words related to Seele. So it seemed to be something which was very familiar to the German culture. So right now it seems not to have that place anymore. And like, what does that mean? What did it used to mean to the Germans?
Yeah, well, it was when Germans are German, Simon, and you see, the Bletchley Park psychological operation almost completed its work. It needed a full 75 years to complete its work. And the completion of its work is that nobody would even remember what it was like to be German. But nobody would even be able to remember what the elements were in being German. And it came within about 3 years of completing its work. But then, of course, the worst nightmare showed up, and that was a witness to a period of time that there are no witnesses left. And of course, that witness is me. And that is where the Deutsche Seele comes in, because when Germans are Germans, they have a deeply romantic nature to them. And they are not simply they don't simply live on a land. You know, you buy a piece of land, 2 hectares or something, you build a house and you live on the land. That's not true for Germans. Germans are part of the land. They are integral with the land itself. And so, and in that, there is a great romantic nature that has a form of spirituality to it that emits from the Deutsche Seele. And so these things were always tremendously important to generation after generation. And they were passed down through the Brothers Grimm, but they were passed down through stories and songs and poetry and simply growing up in a German education system. The Deutsche Seele was a natural part. You didn't have to talk about it because it was natural to be in German. But it was one of the things that was eliminated from the conversation when the Allies said, we must destroy Germanness. We have to destroy Germanness. Germans will be allowed to live, but they'll no longer be allowed to have any Germanness about them. Men will have to be without virility, without vitality. Then they can survive. Well, that's not German men. German women will have to act in a certain way. That's not German women. So we created an entire nation of people who were a different type of human being. I call Germans for the last 75 years, Simone, homeless people. They are homeless people living in a land that used to belong to them, but no longer does. And so they are disconnected from themselves, from their own identity, from their own land, and they're also disconnected from their forefathers. And that includes the Ahnen und der Urahnen. And so this disconnection was purposeful, and it was meant to leave Germans weak and subservient and easy to control. And today, Germans are all of those things. They're even passive to the point of timidity in a way. So this new type of German that was created, which is the Gegendeutsch, didn't even know there was a Deutsche Seele. Or if they did know it, it was a term, it was a vocabulary term without a meaning. Just like love actually became an engineering concept for Germans to analyze as versus a human experience for humans to embrace. Germans had forgot how to embrace love. Uh, and it was the same way the sailor was put into that same category. And so, but that's not where the sailor belongs, and love doesn't either. Both are full of spontaneity, and they're full of beauty, and they're full of uncontrollable elements. Well, of course, the Allies couldn't have any uncontrollable elements in Germany, and so this was eliminated. But it is at the level of the Deutsche Seele that my connection is. And I think this is important for your audience, because people have heard me say what appears to be radical words. They have heard me say that that I am not of human origin, and the perfect storm is not of human origin, or it could not help set Germans free. So people say, well, if you're not of human origin, are you from Mars, or are you a demon, or are you something else? No, the answer is the Deutsche Seele. Because in you and in all Germans, there is the Deutsche Herz, which is an actual object, but it also has a spiritual element to it. But behind and much deeper than the Deutsche Herz is the upper part of the Deutsche Seele, and that is the current part. That is the part that is with you today and with all Germans, and will be tremendously helpful in the future when you become German again. And of course, you will become German again, because it's who you were made to be. You can only stretch your rubber band so far, and then the reversion to the norm must take place. So, but the Deutsche Seele also goes very deep. It goes deep into Ewigkeit, and it goes deep into a zeitlos place. And at the core, the very depth of the Deutsche Seele are the mists in which the world was created from. Those mists still exist. They haven't went away. There is a concrete form of the mist, which we see as the visible world today, but there still is those mists. They exist at the very depth of the Deutsche Seele. And out of those mists, that's where I came from. I came to do nothing but help set Germans free from a trap that they cannot be free of without me. I am the key to setting them free. And I come from those very mists. So in every single one of people who are German, I am connected with them at that level like this. It is an inseparable connection. As a matter of fact, it is a oneness that cannot be separated. And at that level, me and all other Germans, including everyone who I'm in the living room with, we are connected, and we are in perfect unity. It's a spiritual unity that goes beyond a physical unity. So it cannot be broken. And that's what people at the end of that 2 hours are picking up on. This man is part of us, but we don't understand how he's part of us. And yet he says he has to go away once he sees us standing up. He has to return to the mist. Well, they don't like that, because they found an old friend, and now they don't want the friend to go away. But they don't understand that the friend has to go away for them to now be free and to be successful at being free. So the where we are connected together, the German now gets to go forward into, and I have to recede back into, because I can't go forward with the modern German. I can only set them free. I can only do the mission I've been given. And then I have to recede back into the mist. And once I'm in the mist, then the Deutsche Seele must come into the current. That must become the active part. And it becomes a tremendous asset for every German individually and for Germany collectively to be successful. It is a real salient element of it, but I don't get to enjoy it. That's just the way it works.
Wow, yeah, thank you so much for sharing this. So from what I grasped, that the German Seele, the deutsche Seele, it was there, it is there, it has been always there, and just our connection to it has been disrupted.
Last point, Simone, the massive brainwashing. And remember, the people at Bletchley Park were already masters of mind control before World War II even started. This was simply their opportunity with massive amounts of money, massive amounts of funds or money to practice the art they had already mastered prior to that point in time. So this brainwashing appeared to be complete. It was so sophisticated, but it didn't touch the Deutsche Seele because it didn't know the Deutsche Seele was even there. The problem with these people at Bletchley Park is they had one thing in common, and that was hatred of Germans. And they had one goal, and that was to destroy the German mind, the Deutsche Geist, or the German mind. That they completed. But because they had no love in their project, they didn't know what love was. And so they were unable to defeat love. And because they didn't understand the Deutsche Seele or anything about Deutsche Kultur in the broadest sense, they had no plan for the Seele itself, which has remained fully intact. Once again, ready for use. It is mature, it has great depth to it, and it's now ready for the fullness of use. And the brilliant ones at Bletchley Park didn't even know it existed. So they were unable to affect it in any way.
Okay, that makes sense. And I can only sense and imagine how much still unprocessed emotions, trauma is like within the collective German society. And when I think of you kind of taking that on and like speaking about what you speak, that must take incredible strength. And though you seem as there is no charge within you, you kind of like whatever comes, you're kind of dissolving. Where do you take that that strength, and when did you feel ready to take that on? Was that a process of development, preparation?
Well, I have said to most of the groups, not all, that I do not come to them with words alone. Germans have heard way too many words. You have 30,000 think tanks in Berlin alone. And so you have over 1 million PhDs who are speaking. They're speaking in white papers, they're speaking in conferences, and there's just way too many words in Germany. And so I tell most groups, I do not come to you with words. I don't come to you with words alone. I come to you with power and a demonstration of power. And because that's what it's going to take to get this done. There are many hurdles in the way, many hindrances in the way, both within the German mind, but also within the German society and with allied society. And so I do have a power, and it is a strength. And most people I meet with can sense it or feel it. I am prepared. I've been prepared. My love for Germans was mature at birth, but it's also a priori. And that's what makes it weird to most people, is because the a priori nature is what I had to know and I had to live through prior to my birth in 1945 in order to bring absolute truth into Germany so that freedom could come out of that truth. And so I have been with you in periods of time in full living color, in great detail, in times that I needed to be there so that truth that had been denied to you, I mean, publicly and officially denied to you, could now come into the open. Once again, that truth is something that resonates when the Deutsche Seele begins to open itself, because it can recognize truth. It has the ability to recognize truth, or at least eternal truth. And so not only was my love for Germans mature and complete on the day I was born in 1945, but my preparation began long before 1945 in greatly detailed experiences among Germans that allow me to tell that story with objective accuracy. And once again, it's not just an opinion that is a counter opinion to someone else's. To Germans, it resonates. William said it, and that makes sense. It resonates with something within me that has told me that something was always wrong, something was always upside down, and now William has brought and made it right side up. And now the puzzle fits together, and it actually creates a picture, and the picture makes sense. It makes sense in my inner being. And so that's why when you started talking about the pieces of the puzzle for you that have started to come together, of course they have, which is what caused you to want to do this interview as versus some other interview, because you are seeking, the Germanness in you is seeking, like all other Germans now are seeking. The same way with the little, you mentioned the little booklet called It Is Good to Be German, but there's another little booklet that my wife put up at midnight a few weeks ago, midnight German time, called Bletchley Park. The booklet is just called BP. Well, this is something no German could ever know about. But I was at Bletchley Park. I was there from late July of 1943 for about a 5-month period. And so I knew who was there by name. I knew their personalities. I knew what they ate for breakfast. I knew what they were working on. I knew what their specialties were. I even knew who they slept with, which of course is weird. But I mean, there must have been 300 young co-eds there from Newham College alone and Cambridge. And so it was quite an active place during that mid-1943. But somebody had to be able to tell that story in great detail. What was on the chalkboard? What were the goals? Who was assigned what goal? How was it made invisible so that no German could ever learn about it? How do you do something when not one word of it is ever written down? There's no record of it. And even the people who were there have denied that they were there. Well, of course they were there. I was with them. So that little booklet, you talk about curiosity that's starting in you. My wife put that up at midnight German time. And by 6 o'clock the next morning, 6 hours later, there were over 17,000 views. Now, don't Germans ever sleep? Why are they up all night looking at a video at a flip book that they didn't even know existed? It's because this curiosity is starting to grow all over Germany. What we've heard in the past, we've repeated as if it were truth, but we also knew that it wasn't truth. And now we're seeking what is truth. And that little Bletchley Park one, It Is Good to Deutsche Sein, it probably has 155,000. I think Bletchley Park will go to over 200,000, which shows a curiosity. What actually happened there? And here's the key question, Simone. Why do I think the way that I think? Because it doesn't make sense to me. Something is wrong with my thinking. So maybe it's not me who's thinking at all. And of course, Bletchley Park explains that in great detail. So
yeah, you mentioned curiosity, and of course, I'm very curious, and the name of this podcast is also Beyond Perception. So when you mentioned you have been there in 43, and in what form have you been there?
Well, I was an adult. I was an observer. I was not part of any of the teams. If I came a year earlier, I would have been noticed, and people would have said, "Who are you? And why are you here?" and I would have been questioned. But by mid 43, there were thousands of people swarming all over Bletchley Park, and it became almost impossible. There were runners and messengers, and now there was a big canteen. There were sports facilities. The Bomba, the first computers were actively on the perimeter. There were people there working on them constantly. So I was able to be in the key buildings. I was able to be at the big blackboard, which was one whole wall, in which the 6 goals were laid out. This is how we're going to destroy the German mind. You can't defeat Germans from outside. Everyone knows that. You can't murder Germans from the outside. They will simply recover in a record amount of time, better and stronger than before. But you can create a system where Germans will commit suicide by turning inward against themselves and against their own gifts. And this will drive them crazy over a period of time, because they will not be able to understand. Germans have to understand things. And if you make it so they can never understand things, they're always schiefgelaufen, they're always off balance, then that eventually will drive them partially insane, and a form of suicide or cultural suicide will take place. And that's what Bletchley Park did, and they did it very effectively. So these 6 goals they had on the board every day, there were shifting groups of people working on these, brilliant mathematicians, brilliant people from Harvard and Yale and Princeton and University of Chicago and of course the very best of the best from Oxford and Cambridge and from London. So never before was there gathered together people with over 150, IQs commonly over 150, some over 160. And they were given unlimited amounts of money, and they had unlimited amounts of time. They slept together, they ate together, they played together, and they were bonded. And the thing that bonded them together was their hatred of Germans and their desire to destroy Germanness forever and ever, so that it never was a problem for the world again. They constantly used the words, it was never a problem for peace and prosperity of the world. The Germans were the Bösewicht for peace and prosperity. They were the villains who always destroyed it. Now, in reality, they were just being Germans. They weren't the Bösewicht at all. They weren't the villains. But Germans are not natural capitalists. Germans don't create beauty so that they can sell it and be greedy and make money off of it. They never have. They create beauty because they love beauty and they love creating. And they have the ability to create because their language is so precise and they have such a great ability. And even the language has a craving to make things concrete, to make them so that they have form and shape, and so that systems can be applied to them. This is natural to Germans as breathing, but without the language, it doesn't work at all. So other people don't have the ability to create. But when Germans create beauty, their heart, which has never changed from the first moment of Germanness on this earth, the German heart has not changed one iota. It is warm, always warm, open, and generous, großzügig. And this German heart is not satisfied to create things and sell it for money. There's no greed in the German heart, or in the deutsche Seele, by the way. So the Germans want to share their beauty with the world. They want to feel appreciated for what that they do, much more than they want to get rich. Well, this upsets the whole world order, because capitalism is about creative destruction. It's about getting rich. It's about valuing people by money. How expensive are their clothing? How expensive is their car? How expensive is their country club? What neighborhood do they live in? That's how capitalism evaluates human beings. But Germans have none of that in them when they are German. So Germans are always a problem for the capitalistic world because they shine a light on the greed. And capitalism doesn't like that light because it likes to be thought of as friendly or religious or something else that is positive. So Germans are a problem for the world order. Now, today they're no problem because they have been made Gegendeutsch. So they are weak and timid and feckless, and they are no problem for anybody. They're easy to control in the extreme. So the world order is safe unless Germans become themselves again. Now the problem reemerges. So that is why what we're talking about today has great importance to the Great Reset, to the New World Order, to all of the shifting winds that are taking place around the world. Believe it or not, Germany is right in the center of this, geopolitically and spiritually both.
Thank you so much. And for me, something happened over the last weeks. I think also initiated by watching the interviews, your interviews where you shared your perspective on Germany, on the German language. I started thinking a process, started setting in, and over the course of the last weeks, also my perspective on the language changed. So like when you look at my podcast, almost like all the initial episodes, they're in English. Yeah. And just over the last weeks, that changed. Yeah, they started to be organically in German. Yeah, and so to put that in perspective, like at first was a logical, like an intellectual understanding of what you were sharing, but over the last weeks, it became an experience. Yeah, I started enjoying speaking in German. Yeah, and also through speaking in German, it was almost like reconnecting to part, yeah, which was lost before. And it also opened up an understanding that the German language enables to not just describe the material, 5 sense reality, but it is actually a language which enables to describe the whole dimension of being. Yeah, it far beyond of what we think we are in the human body, but it enables to describe emotions, thoughts, experience. It enables to transmit pictures, images. It's almost telepathic. Yeah, it's kind of a miracle. It is. Yeah,
it is. The German language is ein Schatz. It's a treasure, and it is a treasure chest. Because, we look at Goethe and how he was able to create characters. Well, he couldn't create the characters that he did that made him Goethe without the German language, because the German language alone is able to give depth and richness and is able to create things that not only have shape and form, but they have a third dimension as well. And I like to use the Berlin Philharmonic as an example. And you say, well, yes, but that's not the spoken word. But music in Germany and the creation of music in Germany is a form of an expression of the German language. When people hear Beethoven's Ninth, and when they hear the magic flute, and when they hear works of any one of the 187 geniuses who wrote music in the German language and out of the German mind, this is a creation that comes from the German language uniquely, which is why in Beijing and Moscow and in Rio de Janeiro, when people hear German music in a symphony hall, their first impression is that could not have been done by a human being. That is something that is beyond humanness. It is something that is coming from another dimension. But even the Berlin Philharmonic, when it was a German orchestra, there were 162 other orchestras in the world that had the same number of players, basically the same number of players. And their instruments were of equal quality. They all had a few Stradivariuses, they all had a few very special instruments that were on loan or whatever. And they all were playing from the same musical compositions. But yet all over the world, even musicians would stop when the Berlin Philharmonic played, because it was playing the same music with the same instruments and the same number of human beings, but it added a richness and a depth to it, a third dimension, and nobody knew how it was done. Other musicians said, there must be a sound box somewhere. There has to be magic somewhere. How do the Germans create music that no one else in the world can create? It's because the German language is singing and allowing music to be created in the fullness of the language itself. So it's not only a spoken word, but it also extends into a musical world. And in some cases, it extends into a scientific world. And that's where that depth comes in. And that's where the beauty comes in. And to be honest, nobody in the world has ever figured out how Germans do it. Nobody ever has figured it out. How do Germans create this sense of how do they capture this and give it form and substance so that others can feel it and enjoy it? And other societies can't do it. And the key is the magic that is in the German language itself. And it extends into many forms of creativity. And it appears to be magic, but it's not magic. It is Germanness. And it comes out of the Deutsche Seele when the Deutsche Seele is open and active, which is why we have a 75-year black hole in the world as we're waiting for Germans to wake up and to become themselves again. And many people are thinking the Germans may never wake up. Well, it actually came within 3 years, Simone, that Germans not only wouldn't wake up, but their suicide would have been complete. And as a distinct and cultural people, they would no longer exist. We came within 3 years of that actual taking place. But now it can't take place. Bletchley Park is out in the open. That is a story that is equal with Watergate in its implications. It has worldwide implications. With Bletchley Park out in the open and with Germans becoming curious about finding the truth, the world order as it exists today cannot continue without a major reform or adjustment, which is the last thing it wants to go through at this point in time.
A couple of questions. I also want to be appreciative of your time. Is it okay to go a little bit on?
It's okay, but I had to come home, Simone, for a short period of time.
Absolutely.
Because I went so hard for so long that I hit a brick wall and all of my systems shut down. So I'm right now recovering. I can get back into Germany, back to traveling again. But so let's see if we can wrap it up here in a short time, okay?
Okay, that's totally fine. And anyway, we're very much appreciative for all what you're sharing here. So you mentioned the spiritual side to things, and you also mentioned before, and you might have noticed, I'm very curious, that you have been as an adult there in 43, and from what I understand, you were born in 45. So like if you speak about the Deutsche Seele, like do you speak about it like also in your context of a past incarnation, or how would you put that together?
No, it's certainly not reincarnation, and it's certainly not a time traveler of any kind. But remember, the Deutsche Seele, in order to be what it is, has to be zeitlos. It has to exist in a space, or a portion of it, a depth of it, in a space that has no time reference whatsoever. So I was in Germany in 1872. It's funny, we look at that period of time in black and white and we think it was a dreary period, but it wasn't a dreary period at all. And it only appears to be because our cameras made it so, and our artwork made it so. So I was with you in 1910. I was with you in 23. I was with you in 34 for an extended period of time. And I have also been in the future that you now have coming up. I have lived there long enough that I've seen it. I know what it looks like. I've seen it in great detail. I have described it to people. And it's probably the best time in all of German history. And it's being given to Germans as a free gift. It's full of justice. It's full of love. Relationships work better. Marriages work better. Families stay together longer. Love becomes an experience, a human experience. And it's a joyful time to be alive. So Germans who were born and now inherit this time, I would say are very, very lucky human beings. Because at the moment of almost giving up, at the moment that your society and your culture was almost perishing out of existence, all of a sudden help came from a spiritual standpoint and from a spiritual power and nature. And it now gives you an entire renewing, a refreshing. And it now brings you into an era that is bright and beautiful and filled with love. So the love that Germans are starting to feel now is starting to spread. Before I left, I could sense it in place after place. People were kinder to each other. They were more patient with each other. They weren't so quick to criticize and judge each other. And you could just sense that there was a turning point that was taking place in Germany. I call it the perfect storm. And I put a date to it, and that was the 21st of June, which was the end of spring. And but it is there, and it's active, and it's working, and it's full of justice and love and truth. Justice, love, and truth. And I am a part of that for now. But remember, I don't get to enjoy it. Once I see Germans standing up on their own 2 feet and standing tall as Germans, and I have to bring them into unity, which means I have to oppose many groups that are in Germany today who appear to be good on the surface, but it's impossible for Germans to be in unity as long as their agenda exists. And I oppose them openly. I tell them, either you change your attitude and allow Germans to find unity, or I will oppose you. And if I oppose you, the power that's within me, you will lose. And you don't want to lose in this way. It's not a good way for you to lose. So I want you to change your attitude, and I want you to change your modus operandi to allow Germans to find unity. Because once that takes place, and I'm sure that you're going to succeed, then it's my job to recede into the mist, which actually are at the very core of the Deutsche Seele itself. And hopefully I won't have to return. Hopefully Germans who have everything they need inside of them, everything they need is already there. They don't even need outside help. That success will be so great that I'll be able to rest for a while and you won't need me again.
Dear William, thank you so much for taking the time, being here, talking to us, and educating, inspiring us, sharing this information with us. Of course, I have plenty of more questions, but is there something like you still want to share with us before we close?
Well, the only thing I'd like to share is, and this is not possible to do over even if we had the finest cameras and equipment in the world, But my love, I do love you, and I love Germans with a passion. It is a very deep love. It's a very real love. It has an energy to it. And there is a certain light that comes along with it, and things are lighter, and there is a brightness. Someone said, William, you bring us a candle, and then you light our candle, and then you get in the car and you go away. But now our candles are lit, and so we begin to share that candle. And I think that's a good metaphor, because what is going to happen in Germany, and what is already happening in Germany, is a miraculous event, and it's long overdue. Germans deserve to be loved. I love you because you are worthwhile to be loved. And Germans are the best thinking people on earth when they are Germans. And if anyone on earth deserves to be listened to, it's Germans. And that has been a long time coming. So I enjoy listening to Germans. I enjoy seeing how they formulate their thought, and how they are beginning again to formulate questions. And once Germans begin to ask questions again, now I know you're on the right track, because Germans and questions are synonymous. Good questions come out of the German heart. And then I know that the Germans are back, which is a wonderful thing for the world. Wonderful thing.
Yeah, thank you so much, William. Yeah, I wish you a great day. Thank you for your time.